Hello, everyone. My name is Billy Pospisil. I'm going to cover the Colorado River dispute. This was originally resolved in 2019. Um, Being from Colorado, this hits sort of close to home. And during the proposal, I found this case and decided I wanted to investigate further. Moving on to a little background information about the situation. Most of the southwest United States relies on the Colorado River Basin for its water. Although 40 million people use the river flow each year, it has been decreasing each year on average now for 20 years. This conflict is quite complex and it includes Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, California, and the supervision and facilitation team from the federal government. With the growing populations of each state, so does their water consumption. The last time all states agreed about water usage on the Colorado River Basin was in the year 1922. Pictured here is the entire Colorado River Basin. In total, it covers over 240,000 square miles. The river begins in Colorado, but the water basin still supplies water to Wyoming, which is to the north. The Colorado River snakes southwest and joins up with the San Juan River on its journey to fill two major reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. After this, it continues south along the border of California and Arizona after briefly passing through Nevada. The water from this river is stretched far and wide as it still supplies water to New Mexico, even though the river never touches it. Now that there's some context about the Colorado River Basin and what it does, this conflict began with the Imperial Irrigation District in Southern California suing Colorado for water usage. The irrigation district was then required to request water aid in order to water the crops and cost around $200 million. This conflict, involving so many parties and being so complex, took 6 years to complete, even with the common ground of not wanting to destroy the basin. As mentioned before, the populations of each state are growing, especially California and the city of Las Vegas, but water is decreasing, so water usage must go down overall throughout the basin. Briefly mentioned, the common ground was to not destroy the Colorado River Basin. In 1922, an agreement was formed focusing on the growth of the river basin. The premise of the new agreement is also growth, but growth's definition has drastically changed since 1922 for this system. The common ground found in the new agreement was that all parties wanted to keep the river and two major reservoirs above critical levels to where they could not recover if they sank below them. In order for each party to continue using the water from this basin, usage would need to be strictly monitored by the federal government so that they do not place sanctions of their own that they seem fit. This would cause problems because these sanctions would be much more strict and uptight than if they came to an agreement themselves. When large conflicts like these go into the negotiation phase, it is very time-consuming and very difficult to make progress at first. No conflict would go without its setbacks, and this one had a few. The largest this one faced was a threat from the Imperial Irrigation District in California to refuse to work with other parties and demanding $200 million in order to cover their losses from water shortages at the beginning of the conflict. Most of the water in the basin comes from the snow runoff in Colorado and Utah, so these states have no problem with water shortages. This is important because these states might not use more water each year, but the overall water in the system decreases, thus decreasing the water for states downriver. Quickly, before getting into the terms of the agreement, the first major step in agreeing on anything was the fact that none of these states could survive without the water basin providing water to them. This is a great incentive to work with each other and ensure that they at least get some water instead of none. Colorado and Utah have agreed to cut down on the most water since they have never had water problems in the past. Most of the water is coming from snow runoff in these states anyway, and can pull it from different rivers within the states. Another topic of discussion is the city of Las Vegas. Las Vegas has been growing rapidly for some time now, and that is increasing their water usage. With increased water usage, they want to pull more water from the Colorado River Basin, even though there isn't any. The solution for this is that they can pull more water from another basin instead of the Colorado River. One of the final notes on this agreement is that Lake Mead and Lake Powell must be kept above critical levels, and this agreement is lasting 7 years since the signing date in 2019. After 6 years of negotiations, the agreement was finally agreed upon. With the federal government overseeing the entire conflict and resolution, they will be monitoring the success of the agreement and enforcing states to reduce their water usage for 7 years after signing the document. The federal government has no reason to favor one state or another, but they only wanted to ensure an environmental friendly negotiation took place and it was agreed upon. This is important to note because they may have been biased towards an environmental friendly agreement, but they weren't biased towards any state that was involved. Looking deeper into the fact that the federal government was the facilitators for this entire project is important because there is usually a third party hired in order to facilitate these large-scale complex conflicts. Facilitators are supposed to be third party and neutral. This, however, was not the case in this because they were favoring a more environmental friendly situation instead of running the river dry. Thankfully, every party involved also agreed with them, so this did not cause any further conflict. With the government looming over the heads of all the parties, they felt some sense of pressure to form an agreement so more strict rules weren't put in place. However, the government did not force them to come to an agreement in a time period, but it was still of the essence because year after year there was less water to use during the negotiations. The government was again biased in a way to find a solution that would solve the water burden for all of the states, but on their own terms. They would have not let this turn and become an environmental problem for the Southwest U.S. Taking a look on how the agreement is going 3 years into the 7-year deal is as follows. The U.S. is currently following climate change patterns, thus decreasing the river flow even more. With droughts becoming worse in the southwestern United States, many states are still having to request water aid to fulfill their needs. While keeping Lake Mead and Lake Powell above critical levels, states are still having to pull from these two lakes. In the last 22 years, reservoir levels of Lake Mead and Lake Powell have decreased 60%, are still trending downward and nearing critical levels. Once these two reservoirs reach critical levels, they will no longer be able to pull water from them, thus causing another problem. The other problem with not pulling water from these two lakes is water aid is extremely expensive, as seen in the Imperial Irrigation District case when it cost around $200 million in water aid just to fulfill some crops. The overall success of this agreement is difficult to judge because even if states are following through with reducing water usage, supervised by the federal government and all, the amount of water to pull from is still going down dramatically. There is a possibility that if this had taken place several years earlier, the droughts could have been easier to deal with, and waiting until there was not enough water left to come together to negotiate this, it may have been too late. Even though this did not take an incredible amount of time, with this many powerful parties coming together and different ideals and values, it is difficult to tackle tough subjects such as climate change, even though there is undeniable evidence supporting it. When it comes to politics, it gets incredibly complicated and can take years to solve. One thing that I've learned in this class that has been a common occurring theme is being able to understand and look at the conflict from other points of view. This is what allows these very complex and large-scale conflicts to be resolved with results that everyone agrees upon. They take time, but all the states were able to find a solution that was able to benefit everyone, and it was finally agreed upon. The common idea of having no water at all was a large reason that all these parties had agreed upon reducing water usage in order to keep the basin from completely collapsing. Not all of the water groups wanted to reduce, but after 6 years of finding out the core values of the other parties involved, it was finally agreed upon. These here are my sources. Most of them are all the same as my paper. Any questions?